Hello, welcome to Opening the Package, Toy Collecting with the Embrace Cannon. Now, this episode I'm going to talk about one of my, actually probably my top toy line from the 80s, even though it was very short-lived. It was a toy line that had two series to it, although they did have some other stuff planned after that, but only two of the series of figures made it to the shelves. It is a toy line that was ahead of its time in detail, really well sculpted stuff. This episode I'm only going to focus on the action figures. I'm going to do another one in the near future focusing on the other areas of the toy line, playsets, animals, stuff like that, because they did a lot with this toy line in such a short time, and to me had some really cool pieces. But as I'm trying to keep these episodes short, I need to focus more. So the toy line is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the official toy line. Honestly, this was, to me, just such a cool toy line. My parents were D&D. I grew up with D&D. So when this toy line came out, my parents were big on getting me into it. And I got the Fortress of Fang, which is my top play set, and that will be one of the focuses when I come back to this toy line. Is just such an awesome play set. If you've never seen one, played with one, you need to get a hold of one. But like I said, that's for another episode. In this one, I'm just going to talk about the figures. So, within the figures, you have your basic hero. Strongheart. What a name, eh? Not very original name-wise, but you look at the detail. This was 83. Incredibly well done detail for that time frame. I mean, they really put some work into it. Not the most posable, but still posable enough. So he was your main hero. Now, Strongheart and his basically evil equivalent War Duke, which is the main bad guy, which is right here. These are the two that actually seem to appear everywhere. There was a cartoon out at the time. I think one of the reasons why the toy line didn't do too well is the toys did not match up with the cartoon, even though these guys made appearances in it. They weren't main characters. The show wasn't about them. So everyone looked at the toy line and said, wait a minute, what does the toy line have to do with the cartoon show? And got confused. So I think that kind of hurt the toy line a bit, because we're at the age where the cartoons have to match up. And these guys didn't have a cartoon. Now, they also appeared on a couple supplements for the game, but they themselves really didn't have much. I know I have a book that follows War Duke and the Dark Wizard, which I'm trying to remember his name. Give me a moment. It is Kalek. Yeah, it was his battle staff. But I have a little children's storybook that shows these two as the villain in it, a little D&D one. But, so they used the characters, but they weren't out there and well known. Now, as you have your main hero, you have the good wizard, you have the good cleric, the first female figure they did. Very well done. A lot of cloth on her, which I thought was interesting. You have the elven archer, and you have the dwarf. The heroic one. So it covered all the bases on your really heroes. Wizard, cleric, dwarf warrior, elven archer, and basic warrior. On the bad guy side, we've already shown the evil warrior, the evil wizard, and then they, for the first series at least, had the half-orc assassin. Now, once more, I love the detail on him. I'm a bit disappointed here and there on a few little features, like he does not hold his, Kalek here does not hold his, staff very well. Although he was the first figure I got, because on the Fortress of Fang, it shows him at the top, and my parents mistakenly thought that meant he was the main hero, which I always thought was rather interesting. They went with the generic stuff of the evil guys look evil, so. But he was the first figure I had ever got for it, and he never held the staff well. I was a bit disappointed. And the interesting thing about him, I've seen pictures of, one, the prototype for him, that looked like they had stitched up his arms so he could barely move. And then, also, they were going to do a second version of him that looked like he was fatter and had like worms and stuff crawling around him. You can find pictures of that prototype online. They did do a good job even in his underclothes. He basically has tattered blue underclothes on. So, you know, they did skimp on details there. So that was the first line of regular figures. Then they also did a line of the Giants. Now the Giants, for some weird reason, were not given names. I'll cut right there. So the Giants, for some reason, were not given real names. You have Young Male Titan. Now the cool thing, these guys had their sheaths, so you could put their swords in them. And they came with, you know, more weapons than the regular guys did. And they came with these oversized helms. Nicely detailed, but you put it on, it doesn't look quite right. They look kind of absurd. So I've never been impressed with the helms, but they all have them. You have North Lord. Once more, oversized helm, doesn't quite work. But he came with an axe, sword. You can obviously switch the axe and sword around as you want. So the shield and the sword are very much, you can see the influence of Clash of Titans in him, which I thought was interesting. And then, of course, for the other large figure they came out with in that first series is the dun 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 Ogre King. And what's more, his helm's not quite as absurd size-wise, but it really, you look at it, it doesn't really add anything to him. It's a bit much. But the detail is still really impressive on them. So that's the first series. These were the first guys available. You can find them everywhere. They're really cool, if you ask me. So then, of course, they did a second series. Now, in that second series, they re-released, I think, every single one. I'm not 100% certain on this, obviously. But they re-released all the figures with Battlematic action. So he's the only one I have that has the Battlematic action. But you can see that basically they're identical, except for you have the switch in the back, which allows him to fling his sword. So they started doing the Battlematic thing, and most of the guys were re-released. At least I think all the warriors. I'm not sure about the wizards and the cleric, but the warriors were pretty much re-released with something like this, so they could sword fight. Cool little feature. And so all the ones obviously coming out started to have those features. Here we have the Barbarian. And he's a bad guy, obviously. We have one of my favorites, Dark Knight, Dark Knight. That's wrong. Dark Warrior, who that's his Battlematic. I love the detail on his shield. The weapon is, you know, cobra little serpent thing. Obviously, a serpent thing going. You can see the serpents around him. Sword's not too impressive, but the rest of him, I really love the detail on this one. You can see it. Snake there. Really cool figure. And his name, is Grimsword. I should know these names. Just hard, so I cheated and I have a little thing right there, obviously. But this is Grimsword. I think he's my favorite of the villains. He looks really cool. Then you have Drex. Now, Drex I don't have his shield for, although you can see once more they're going for a serpent kind of motif, serpent skull. He's kind of plain, but once more the Battlematic action. Ooh. So that second series bad guys. Now, second series good guys were actually harder to find. Although Bomar here was I think the easiest. He's the one that obviously is the easiest to find in the aftermath. He's obviously the Grimsword's. You know, you can compare. They often did that. You know, you have him. You have basically his evil equivalent. You know, the resemblance to the comparison is fairly obvious. Except for he has his cloak, which keeps falling off. But you know, you can see kind of the difference. You know, a bit more, more weapons and stuff as they went into the second series and the Battlematic. Now, the other heroes for the good guys were much harder to find. You have Death, who is I have a Death. She's broken, and this is a female figure, by the way. Not very feminine looking. I was like, it's hard to remember she's female sometimes. But I have none of her equipment, and she's broken. But I have a Death. Very hard to find. The other one that's hard to find is Hawkloyd, the Ranger. They didn't do as many figures, obviously, for the second series, although there was supposed to be a Viking. I forget his name right off the bat. And there were a couple other things that were being produced that didn't make it. I have none of the second series Giants. They did do them. Now, all the Giants for the second series switched over. You see how they all came with shields? Well, in the second series, this whole arm was basically a missile launcher. You put the emblem in the shield, fired out. They would hold the shield, you'd stick the emblem in, and you'd be able to press a button, and the emblem would fire out. So all three of the original Giants were re-released as shield shooters. Slightly color variation primarily on him. These guys looked fairly the same. Then they did Mandoom and Metaflame, who are very rare, very hard to find. And they were also shield shooters. They were, interestingly enough, the first series, these guys don't get names. Second series, they all get names. Go figure. They also had a prototype for a Cyclops called, I believe, Pulverize. And I ends with EYE, Pulverize. That didn't get released. So there was a lot of second series stuff that didn't get released. I'll go more into the prototypes for the monsters and playsets that didn't get released in the next video for this. But I definitely want to do this because this is a toy line that I love. That I'm glad I started collecting again because I lost all the ones I got when I was a kid were gone, and so I spent a while building this collection back up. I'm obviously missing some of the rare pieces, but I have all the original characters complete, and so I'm very happy with the collection of them. The detail, I mean, you look at like our dwarf here, who does have a name, and like I said all these characters had names. The Giants didn't. You know, like, look at the detail on his backpack and stuff. For 83, this is detailed. I mean, these guys were ahead of their time. The figures were just so well done. The colorations can be a bit weird. I mean, you know, the yellow sword doesn't quite look right. His axe. Everything about the North Lord. I mean, the blue just looks a bit off. So some of the colorations could be a bit weird. But the detail I love, and I think they were doing the right thing with. And obviously, thing like there are things that they could have improved. So I'm very happy with this line of figures. This is, like I said, one of my favorites. It's up there as a collection I had to have. So hopefully you enjoy it. I mean, these guys are just awesome. And so, next time I cover Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, I'll have a couple of figures with me just to show how they interact with the playset and the beast and stuff. But they did a whole bunch of really cool monsters and such that were released. And then they had a whole bunch that weren't released that were you know, really cool looking. So it's one of those things where they had a lot of stuff planned that just, it didn't go over well. If it would have gone over well, we would have so many cool toys, I think. But that's life. You have to deal with it. So, like I said, this is a collection, and this is one of the few 80 toys that haven't been brought back in any way, shape, or form, but I don't know if they need to because you have so many similar stuff that's out there. I mean, Lord of the Rings came out, and they've done some really awesome figures, as you saw in my last one. But the basic style toys has been done, and it will always be done, the Warriors and such. Although I think it would be cool if Adventures in Dragons tried a new line. If anything, I'd love to see these characters brought back. You don't know who owns the rights or anything. But I think with our modern toy-making styles, you could take this line and really improve it and make it really awesome. So it's one of the things I'd like to see. I don't know how the rights go. These were done by LJN, which is out of business. You know, they did Thundercats and a few other really cool lines. But in the end, they didn't last, so the rights get all funky. And so that will be my show for this time around. So I hope you've enjoyed my episode here on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Action Figures. I will be doing a follow-up, as I said, and that should be fun as well. Please email me, opentpackage@gmail.com. And hopefully I get some good comments and questions and ideas for future shows. I'm enjoying doing this and don't plan to stop anytime soon. So, thanks for checking it out. Till next time.